The untold truth about Nelson Mandela isn't what you think. While history remembers him as a saint who forgave his oppressors, the real story is far more complex. Nelson Rolihlahla Mandela was born in 1918 in a small village called Mvezo, where his name, Rolihlahla, literally meant troublemaker in his native Xhosa language, perhaps a prophecy of the revolutionary he would become. What most don't realize is that Mandela wasn't born into poverty but privilege. His father was a tribal chief and advisor to the royal family of the Thembu people, making young Nelson essentially African aristocracy. The Nelson in his name? That wasn't his birth name at all. On his first day of school, his teacher gave him this English name, as was customary during colonial rule, effectively stripping him of his cultural identity. This early experience with the erasure of African identity would shape his political consciousness forever. Contrary to popular belief, Mandela wasn't always committed to peaceful resistance. In 1961, he co-founded Umkhonto we Sizwe, or Spear of the Nation, the armed wing of the African National Congress. He personally received military training in Algeria and Ethiopia, and under his leadership, the group carried out sabotage campaigns against government targets. When arrested in 1962, Mandela had explosives in his possession and admitted in court to planning acts of sabotage against the apartheid regime. Most documentaries skip over this militant phase, but understanding it is crucial to comprehending the complete man. Mandela was not a pacifist like Gandhi or Martin Luther King Jr. He believed armed resistance was necessary when peaceful methods failed. During his trial, he openly stated, "I do not deny that I planned sabotage. I did not plan it in a spirit of recklessness, nor because I have any love of violence. I planned it as a result of a calm and sober assessment of the political situation." His 27 years in prison shaped him profoundly, but the details of this transformation are often sanitized. For the first 18 years, Mandela was imprisoned on Robben Island, where he slept on a straw mat in a tiny cell, and was forced to do hard labor in a limestone quarry without sunglasses, permanently damaging his eyes. The prison guards would urinate in his food, and he was allowed only one visitor and one letter every 6 months. Letters to and from his wife Winnie were heavily censored, sometimes taking months to reach their destination. Few know that during this time, the U.S. government labeled Mandela a terrorist. The CIA allegedly played a role in his 1962 arrest, and he remained on the U.S. terrorism watch list until 2008, long after receiving the Nobel Peace Prize and becoming South Africa's president. Margaret Thatcher called the ANC a typical terrorist organization, while Ronald Reagan vetoed sanctions against the apartheid regime. Even fewer know about Mandela's relationship with Fidel Castro. When Mandela was released from prison in 1990, one of the first people he called was Castro, thanking him for Cuba's support in the fight against apartheid. Cuban internationalists have done so much for African independence, freedom, and justice, Mandela said during a visit to Cuba in 1991, a stance that alienated many Western allies but reflected his principled approach to politics. The story of his marriage to Winnie Mandela is often oversimplified. While he was in prison, she became a powerful political figure in her own right, but also controversial for her alleged involvement in violence. Their relationship deteriorated, partly due to his imprisonment, and they separated in 1992, just 2 years after his release. The personal toll of their political struggle is rarely highlighted in sanitized accounts of their lives. Perhaps most surprising is how Mandela viewed his own legacy. He consistently emphasized that he was part of a collective leadership, not a lone hero. "I stand here before you not as a prophet, but as a humble servant of you, the people," he said in his release speech. Yet the West has often iconized him, turning him into a one-dimensional symbol of forgiveness while ignoring his radical politics. What's often overlooked is that Mandela's economic views remained decidedly left-wing. He was a democratic socialist who believed in nationalizing key industries. His pragmatic approach to governing meant he moderated these views in office, working with businesses to rebuild South Africa, but he remained critical of unfettered capitalism. Massive poverty and obscene inequality are such terrible scourges of our times, he said, that they have to rank alongside slavery and apartheid as social evils. Mandela's policy of reconciliation wasn't naive forgiveness, but strategic pragmatism. He understood that vengeance would destroy South Africa. Courageous people do not fear forgiving for the sake of peace, he explained. The Truth and Reconciliation Commission he established wasn't just about healing. It was about preventing civil war in a country where the oppressed majority could have easily sought violent revenge. The media portrayal of Mandela as a saint has obscured his human complexity. He admitted to being an absent father, neglecting his children for the cause. To be the father of a nation is a great honor, but to be the father of a family is a greater joy, he reflected late in life, acknowledging his failings. This humanizes him far more than the perfect icon we've created. Few remember that Mandela was a gifted boxer in his youth, trained every morning while in prison, and maintained this discipline throughout his life. I did not enjoy the violence of boxing so much as the science of it, he wrote in his autobiography. This disciplined approach to physical and mental challenges defined his political methodology as well. Mandela's relationship with the British royal family is another fascinating footnote. Despite the UK's complicated history with apartheid South Africa, he formed a close friendship with Queen Elizabeth II, whom he called Elizabeth rather than Your Majesty. This personal touch and willingness to transcend protocol characterized his diplomatic approach. The truth about Nelson Mandela is that he was a revolutionary who became a statesman, a militant who became a peacemaker, not because he changed his goals, but because he adapted his methods. He was strategic, pragmatic, and above all, human. His legacy isn't that of a perfect saint who magically forgave his oppressors, but of a complex man who chose reconciliation over retribution because it was the only way forward for his country. As Mandela himself said, "I am not a saint, unless you think of a saint as a sinner who keeps on trying." No, Mendesi, the untold truth about Nelson Mandela is that his greatness lies not in mythical perfection, but in his very human journey from freedom fighter to global icon, a journey with contradictions, tactical shifts, and profound moral courage that should inspire us to see beyond simplistic narratives about complex historical figures.